why we're talking about Ukraine is because of the gas prices. We already talked about the gas prices already. I don't know if there's like more to talk about with respect to the gas prices. Here, we'll just play this real quick.
Now to President Biden pushing for relief at the
and
gas.
then we're going to talk about Russia Ukraine today. Slavoj Žižek had a take on it, all the stuff.
Calling for a federal gas tax holiday and urging states to take action too. This comes as nearly 48 million people are expected to travel for the 4th of July holiday, including a record 42 million driving despite those high prices. Our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, has the latest. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Michael. Well, the president is hoping that this will provide Americans some relief this summer. In a speech this afternoon, Biden will call on Congress to suspend the gas tax for 3 months. That means Americans could save about 18 cents a gallon, meaning in all they would save about $70 million a day. But it's also going to cost the government about $10 billion over these 3 months. That's money that would normally go to funding key infrastructure projects. The president is also urging states to halt their gas taxes and again calling for oil refineries to step up their capacity. But of course, none of this is a guarantee. The president needs Congress to act on this, and he is already facing opposition from members of both parties. Look, officials here admit that this alone is not going to fix this problem, that it's not going to somehow stop surging gas prices. So think of this more as a temporary Band-Aid to provide some relief rather than a long-term solution. Robin.
Some much-needed relief, Mary. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right.
Anyway, needs Congress for 18 cents. That's 18 cents. It's nothing. It's meaningless. Okay? Meaningless. $18.4. That's $2.52 in savings for a full tank of gas. Do you ever wonder if geopolitical analysts ever have to deal with that level of scrutiny in parasocialism? Just curious. No, but they do get fucking ass blasted regularly for not going along with like America's imperialist endeavors and America's imperialist wants and needs. Yes, people literally fucking. Famously, like Noam Chomsky. And Norm Finkelstein and many other thinkers, including like even realists that aren't like actually fucking leftists or anything like that. Conservative realists are if they're not in line with the American attitude, with the underlying like the underlying American sentiment on what should happen. Mersheimer was almost lost his fucking job despite being a tenured professor for talking about Ukraine and actually nailing it years ago about what would happen in Ukraine. The West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path is, I think, one of the literally just like one of the most important fucking things that he's written about Ukraine. It happened to a T. He is a conservative, yes. And they go fucking buck wild. They go bananas mode. They go crazy mode, right? All the while, the budget that we allocated for the military-industrial complex and weapons for Afghanistan neatly fits into the budget now for Ukraine. It's exactly the same price. Around $52 to $54 billion a year was going into Afghanistan in funds. Now $52 to $54 billion a year is going to Ukraine. Do you not consider that to be at least a little strange? Do you not consider that to be at least a little weird? How? How do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened? Do you think that's a coincidence? No, of course it's not a coincidence. That's a budget allocation for the military-industrial complex. They are going to take that money. They're going to take that money from your fucking pockets one way or the other. Okay? And they're making that money work again. I think it happened because Russia invaded Ukraine. Yes. What leads you to believe that it had to be not 20 billion, not 30 billion, but exactly 52 to 54 billion dollars, the exact same amount? And it's really frustrating. It's really, really frustrating when we think about this. I mean, when we talk about this sort of stuff. Afganistan 3 trilyon rakamı duymuştum. No, 3 trillion over the course of 20 years, but 54 billion was the last annual budget. Was the last year's cost. Are you conspiracy theorists now? You think it's a conspiracy theory to assume to say that the capitalist military industrial complex has an annual budget that they've allocated that they want to make sure they get from their number one facilitators and funders, i.e. the American government? If you've ever worked at a big corporation, if you have even a little bit of an understanding of how like corporate accounting works, you recognize that corporations, especially that like corporations or even like the people that work inside of corporations have a level of spending that they engage year over year. And by the end of the year, if they haven't hit that fucking spending, in an effort not to reduce their spending, in an effort to ensure that they get that same level of funding, they will try to fucking find ways to spend money. Because it's already allocated to them. This is a very common practice that exists in every facet of our lives. These are budget goals. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how capitalist corporations work. You can say I'm a conspiracy theorist all you want, but it is the truth. It is not a conspiracy theory, okay? It's just a conspiracy. They are conspiring. Yes, I was a Big Four auditor, can confirm. Yep. And it's not like they're hiding this. This is just basic accounting. The military does it too. The only problem is when it comes to war, you see the underlying, you see the underlying reasons as it bloodthirsty and bad. So it hurts your feelings to think about it in that direction because you're not thinking about like fucking, I don't know, your startup insuring or like your little workplace making sure that you order even more fucking snacks or whatever to make sure that you hit your budget at the end of the quarter. And instead, we're talking about guns being shipped out overseas with zero accountability and zero way of tracking said guns. Guns that end up in the black market. Guns that will be used by white supremacist militias. Guns that will then turn on to European countries, inevitably, when the war ends. This is how it works. This includes paintings for nonprofits bought for 10 plus K, stupid shit like that. Yeah, it is. Every part of capitalism does this. We literally just did that with our training budget. Nobody uses, so we spend it on new chairs for our team. Yep. Libs calling you conspiracy theorists when they still believe Russiagate, when the Russian bots are manipulating everything on social media. Yeah, exactly. Yep, you have to hit certain goals each quarter for spending in the DoD or else money is taken from you. So that's how it works, and that's how it's working in Ukraine as well. And it doesn't even matter. Why do they make it so obvious? Are they incompetent or just because we're stupid or that everyone is apathetic? I mean, look at this chat. I'm a fucking out and about socialist political commentator, one of the very few in this country, and even in this community, on the internet, in independent media, you have a fuckload of people, even in my community, saying, you're wrong, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're making this up. They don't need to hide it because people will still look at this fundamental truth and refuse to acknowledge it. Consent has already been manufactured, so much so that you have people defending the ever-expanding military budgets in here. Even in here. Where do you think that comes from? You keep saying your prediction that Russia invading would be terrible for them was correct, but it hasn't been really. They formed a new energy coalition with China and others, and the ruble is now stronger than it's been for decades. Can you explain why you still think it was bad for Russia? It's bad for Russia because they're fucking exhausting their resources. They're exhausting their fucking troops. They're blowing up their fucking equipment over and over again. They had a bunch of their generals killed. How the fuck would you consider that to be good? They're now sanctioned out the ass by the entire global economy, okay? And not only that, but also, like, they are slowly but surely becoming the next, like, hermit kingdom. There's so much resentment against Russia and Russian people around the world. All of that shit fucking sucks for Russia in general. And not only that, but like they don't have a lot of they can't continue doing this for as long as they're doing it. I mean, thousands have already died and thousands more are going to die. It's a horrible decision. If the Minsk agreement would have been agreed to by Ukraine originally, okay? If the Minsk agreement was agreed to by Ukraine, by the Ukrainian leadership originally, all of this could have been avoided, okay? All of this could have been avoided. Because ultimately, the 15-point negotiations that they put together for peace that was eviscerated by everyone's favorite orangutan, Boris Johnson, literally has the 15-point Minsk agreement. I mean, the 15-point negotiation plan that they put forward in Antalya was literally just the same as the Minsk agreement, basically. Oh, lastly, and most importantly, Russia has undermined the confidence that, or the fear that other people in similar, in neighboring nations had on its military prowess and power in general. That's the reason why you have countries like Finland and Sweden talking about joining NATO. Countries that never would dare do so and had like a functioning neutrality agreement. Okay. Never in writing, but still a neutrality agreement in general, are now recognizing that Russia is spread too thin with Ukraine already, and that it would be virtually impossible for them to invade with a land invasion. So yeah, that's a huge fucking L for Russia. A gigantic L for Russia. Yes, and as a Russian chatter stated in here, they also lost McDonald's, which is a big fat L too. Which is why I always say, like, with what army would Russia invade Europe? With what army would they have invaded Poland? Lauren Endel, thank you for the 10 gifted subs. Other than the West, the world is mostly neutral on this. Oh yeah. Well, that's because obviously there's not a lot of confidence in Western powers from plenty of the third world anyway. Yeah, the McDonald's I'm joking about, they actually reopened it as like McRussia or some shit. Can't even visit my family. No idea if it will cause issues to return to Britain. Overall consent has been manufactured in Russia for those who haven't left by this point based on talks with my family and friends. Yeah, it's terrible overall. It's called Tasty now? Yeah. Yeah, Mikvanya. Miksuka bliat. Давай, давай. That's what it is now. Completely not true. As Putin just wanted to take the land that is Ukraine today and get Transnistria too, nothing would have stopped him. No doubt about that. He gives 0 Fs on any agreements. The ex-KGB agent Gopnik that he is. What Putin wants and what Putin can get are two entirely separate things, my friend. Like, that's another thing that you're not seeing here. You know? Anyway. So, motherfuckers make up more story revolving around Putin than they do Kim Jong-un these days? Well, yeah, because he's the hot guy that everybody cares about and everybody talks about. This is not about NATO expansion. It's about Ukraine extracting oil and gas and becoming a competitor to Russia. Yes, but that is also paired with NATO expansion. So yeah, no, it is still about NATO expansion as well. Because without NATO involvement, or without like EU involvement, without Western involvement in Ukrainian affairs, Russia can control what kind of oil and gas Ukraine extracts, because Ukraine is now either going to be beholden to either the Western interests or beholden to Russian interests. So no, it is about that. Anyway. Dude, you are not taking the side of the Soviet Union. You're taking the side of the same capitalist evil you criticize in the USA. What? Dude, I'm not siding with Russia. Like, why are you inventing a position that I do not have? Well, easy to talk from California in Europe that Russia is a threat, he says. Once Ukraine is taken, Russia will take time to heal, but they will take those countries if given the chance. Dude, you are not... Yeah, okay, dude. With their fucking pathetic army that has been thoroughly dismantled and eviscerated by dudes who didn't even know how to fucking use man pads until like a year ago. It took like 3 hours of a fucking CIA guy in khaki pants to come in and explain to like some fucking Nazi dude how to shoot a fucking man pad. And then now Moskova's down. Now fucking Russian warships are getting fucked. Russian tanks are getting obliterated, and you're over here being like, yeah, no, Russia is totally going to fucking destroy even fucking like what, NATO countries that already have NATO armies and NATO equipment? Really? It's crazy. Wait, hold on. Ukraine's getting cooked in the East, though. Of course they're getting cooked in the fucking East. Hyper focusing on one region is a region where there's also like already well-established resistance forces that are anti-Ukraine as well. A region that they're very familiar with is a little bit different than trying to take over a 44 million fucking country, specifically with like a lot of resentment towards Russia. It's evident you are not following the military developments on the ground. You are still talking about Russia being eviscerated as if we're in the first month of the war. They've been winning nonstop for months. Yeah, dude. Gigantic dubs. Russia is weak, can't even beat Ukraine. Also, Russia is going to take over Europe. Europe is quite the double thing. It doesn't even fucking matter. Okay? But ultimately, Russia is gaining more ground in eastern Ukraine. Russia is gaining more ground in eastern Ukraine. The original Minsk agreements would have given up no territory to Russia and would have instituted independent regions that would still firmly be within Ukrainian borders as an active territorial dispute between Russia and Ukraine, rendering any likelihood that Ukraine could ever fucking join NATO to be useless, okay? And that was their main point. They wanted to have a say in what happens in Ukraine. That was their goal. Now they're taking that fucking region and even more by force.
The cost you are paying for the product. Do it now. Do it today. Go up. So let's be honest with one another.
But ultimately, if we're talking about like whether Americans care about fucking Ukraine or not, like of course they don't. As I said correctly that they would not. They care about gas prices. That's it. They care about how much they have to pay for in the pump. Okay? And not only that, but like, so the OG Minsk agreement is a real missed opportunity, in your opinion. I do think that the Minsk agreement would be fundamentally better than the current predicament. Anything would be better than the current predicament. And the peace negotiations that they were undergoing, that the Ukrainian leadership was actually on board with, literally look like the Minsk agreement, and then some. And also more appeasement. Yup, worked before. Motherfucker, if you're not down with a nuclear holocaust, you can't make statements like this. This is my original assessment from day one, is like the opposite of appeasement is war. Okay? And that's precisely what you're fucking advocating for without actually advocating for it. You are, in the words of John Mersheimer, leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And you have no fucking interest in that. You don't have the balls for nuclear holocaust. You don't want nuclear holocaust to happen. But you have no problem fucking throwing Ukrainian bodies at as a destabilizing force that also makes a fuckload of profits for the military-industrial complex against a foreign adversary that you have declared to be a problem and a threat. That's it. These are the terms right now. This is exactly what's going on. And I am not saying just give Russia Eastern Europe. Of course I'm not saying that. Of course. But motherfuckers keep saying appeasement, but like, what's up? There are no NATO planes that are flying over Ukrainian airspace. There's no no-fly zone. There's no boots-on-the-ground military warfare happening with NATO forces inside of Ukraine. So what are you talking about? Why is that not happening? Because Article 5 would dictate that there would be a full-scale assault. There would be full-scale nuclear superpowers fighting against one another. Nuclear holocaust. You understand it for certain things. I mean, remember the conversation that we had a while back where I showed you some polling numbers where like the support for a no-fly zone was like incredibly high, but then a support for sending in American and NATO forces was incredibly low. But those two things mean the exact same thing, and yet people didn't understand that. Why are you still repeating this attitude? Okay, how you said at the beginning of the war you were like that Ukraine only has a few Nazis. I never said Ukraine only has a few Nazis. I said Ukrainian nationalism is a complex story, but unfortunately, Ukrainian reactionaries, Ukrainian nationalists have a lot of influence beyond just the paramilitaries that are firmly within the ranks of the National Guard and doing territorial defense. Why do I mean that? Well, another take that I had that absolutely fucking came true was that in times of unjustifiable and brutal invasions from a larger force, the most right-wing and the most nationalist forces are seen as emancipatory forces that are doing ultimately good things for the country. Putin is responsible for the increase in Nazi rhetoric and increase in Nazi prominence, just like he's responsible for the justification for NATO expansion in Eastern Europe. His actions were incredibly idiotic in every fucking capacity. Okay? Why do you reuse phrases such as primrose path like a silly child who just discovered the word? It's just the title of that famous John Mersheimer piece that I've read and mentioned multiple times throughout my Ukraine coverage. But I guess this is the first time you've encountered the word or me saying it as on your sock account, and that's why you are making it seem like it's ridiculous for me to repeatedly use it. Nice though. There you go. Yeah, I got temporary use of Bitcoin and dumped it, just like I got temporary use of your mom and dumped her. Are all Mormon kids fucked up like this? I hooked up with this girl last week who was Mormon and she had self-harm scars on her breast. Yeah, good luck, dude. I doubt that you fucked anyone, okay? At least consensually. Ay, ay, ay. Fucking weirdo. Pacifism is the wrong response to the war in Ukraine by Slavoj Žižek. Slavoj Žižek took the time out and wrote an article about what's going on in Ukraine, and he actually supported NATO in the end of this, okay? He said that we need to give more guns to NATO, and we need to give more guns to Ukraine, and that's the right thing to do. For those who cling to pacifism in the face of the Russian attack in Ukraine remain caught in their own version of Imagine. Imagine a world in which tensions are no longer resolved through armed conflicts. Europe persisted in this world of Imagine, ignoring the brutal reality outside of its borders. Now it's time to awaken. The dream of a quick Ukrainian victory, the repetition of the initial dream of a quick Russian victory, is over. In what looks more and more as a protracted stalemate, Russia is slowly progressing, and its ultimate goal is clearly stated. There is no longer any need to read between the lines when Putin compares himself to Peter the Great. Saying like he's a Duganist. He's saying that Putin wants to take over, I guess, the entire USSR territories and reinstitute some form of the Russian Empire. And that the only way to stop that is by, implementing a non-U.S. controlled NATO, which is, of course, one of the dumbest things that Slavoj Žižek has ever said. I guess when you write the most amount of books that any other fucking philosopher has ever written, you ultimately end up writing a bunch of dumb shit, too, in there. You cannot have a NATO without the United States control, especially because NATO is an invention of the United States. It's a mechanism of controlling European interests and using Europe as a force for American imperialism, Western imperialism as a broader category. So kind of crazy to Balkan post like this, Slavo. That was interesting. He was not taking away anything. He's returning. He was returning and reinforcing that's what he's doing. More than focus on particular issues, is Russia really just returning, and to what? We should carefully read Putin's general justification in his claim. In order to claim some kind of leadership, I'm not even talking about global leadership. I mean leadership in any area, any country, any people, any ethnic group should ensure their sovereignty. Because there is no in-between, no intermediate state. Either a country is sovereign or is a colony, no matter what the colonies are called. So he's saying there are two categories of state, the sovereign and the conquered. In Putin's imperial view, Ukraine should fall into the latter category. Or he's saying that Ukraine either has to be under Russian control, which is true. That is what he's saying. That is what Putin is saying. Or under the control of Western influence and be a colony to the West. But there is no emancipation for Ukraine in either category here. Ukraine either is going to be a Western CIA client state or it's going to be a Russian client state. That's it. There is no emancipated free Ukraine in this process. Okay? It's just not happening. It's far too Eastern for it to happen, for it to occur. That's just the reality. Okay? Hassan is the dumbest motherfucker. He thinks Žižek is wrong. I don't. I mean, he would no doubt have his shit pushed in. Fuckboys never learn, I guess. Lol. Oh my god, dude. I love when motherfuckers say dumb shit like this because they ultimately have the exact same approach to like whenever Chomsky says something that they disagree with. And as it is no less clear from Russian official statements in the last months, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Finland, and the Baltic states, and ultimately Europe itself, fall into the latter category. I disagree. What Russians' interests in said areas, or what Putin's interest in said areas, is entirely removed from the reality of what will happen in said areas. So there is that. I think this is like this is an inaccurate assessment of what's going on the fucking ground. If Ukraine can be held up when it literally had no functioning fucking standing military in 2014, and in a matter of 10 years or less than 10 years, 8 years, Ukraine turned into a country that can literally stop the Russian ground forces and Russian air forces, then it's over. You know what I mean? There's no fucking Russia invading Finland in that scenario. It's just not happening. That doesn't mean Ukraine is winning. Of course, Ukraine is losing more territory than it originally had in the beginning of this, okay? In the beginning of this invasion. But it's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, safe. We know what the call to allow Putin to save his face means. It means accept. We know what the call to allow Putin to save his face means. It means accepting not a minor territorial compromise in Donbass, but Putin's imperial ambition. The reason this ambition should be unconditionally rejected is that in today's global world, in which we are all haunted by the same catastrophes, we are all in between an intermediate state, neither a sovereign country nor a conquered one. To insist on full sovereignty in the face of global warming is sheer madness, since our very survival hinges on tight global cooperation. But Russia doesn't simply ignore global warming. Why was it so mad at the Scandinavian countries when they expressed their intention to join NATO? With global warming, what is at stake is the control of the Arctic Passage. That's why Trump wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark. Due to the explosive development of China, Japan, and South Korea, the main transport route will run north of Russia and Scandinavia. Russia's strategic plan is to profit from global warming, control the world's main transport route, plus develop Siberia and control Ukraine. In this way, Russia will dominate so much food production that it will be able to blackmail the whole world. This is the ultimate economic reality beneath Putin's imperial dream. Those who advocate less support for Ukraine and more pressure on to negotiate, inclusive of accepting painful territorial renunciations, like to repeat that Ukraine simply cannot win the war against Russia. True, but I see exactly in this the greatness of the Ukrainian resistance. They risk the impossible, defying pragmatic calculations, and the least we owe them is full support. And to do this, we need a stronger NATO, but not as a prolongation of U.S. politics. So I don't have a disagreement with a lot of what he's saying. I think his assessment about Russia's territorial ambitions and Russia's global power ambitions are correct. I do, however, disagree with this, okay? This is the fundamental disagreement I have with Slavoj Žižek's analysis here, okay? We need a stronger NATO, but not as a prolongation of the U.S. politics is insane. It's like saying, I want a McDonald's without the fucking Big Mac, okay? It just doesn't work. Then that's not McDonald's. This is such a gigantic contradiction that it denies reality. It denies the reality of why NATO was created to begin with. It denies the reality of what NATO's express purpose is. It denies everything. And that, in and of itself, is something that I cannot overlook. The U.S. strategy to counteract through Europe is far from self-evident, not just Ukraine. Europe itself is becoming the place of proxy war between U.S. and Russia. So he recognizes that too, by the way, which may well end up by a compromise between the two at Europe's expense. No shit. This is the original reason for why European nations weren't exactly as on board with NATO in the beginning, before many, many years of Red Scare propaganda and also global development from Western nations, the Marshall Plan, and also successfully squashing and destroying any kind of communist or even reformist leftist movements, trade unionist movements in European nations under the auspices of developing a strong and robust defense network in Europe that we now know as NATO. Okay? You get it? Before then, there were plenty of countries that were very much not in favor of NATO expansion or NATO in general in Europe. Why were they not in favor of it? Because they did not want to give up their foreign policy They did not want to give up their foreign policy and the control that they have over their own fucking foreign policies simply for the initiatives and the imperialist endeavors of the U.S. empire. There are only two ways for Europe to step out of this place: to play the game of neutrality, a shortcut to catastrophe, or to become an autonomous agent. Just think how the situation may change if Trump wins the next U.S. elections. While some leftists claim the ongoing war is in the interest of NATO industrial military complex, which uses the need for new arms to avoid crises and gain new profits, their true message to Ukraine is, okay, you are the victims of a brutal aggression, but do not rely on our arms because this way you play into the hands of the industrial military complex. No, I think it's more complex than that. I think people, at the very least, these are powerless people, by the way. We have no control over what happens with respect to American foreign policy. But someone like myself, or someone like even Noam Chomsky, which is, again, completely powerless, and the American government will never listen to people like us, simply state that peace negotiations are the only way to end conflict. It doesn't matter if millions of people die. It doesn't matter if 10,000 people die. It doesn't matter for 10 people to die. Ultimately, all conflicts are solved with treaties and peace negotiations. And for some weird reason, we are not seeing any interest in peace negotiations or the pursuit of peace negotiations against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and only talking about how well Ukraine is doing, greatly emphasizing Ukraine's military, greatly overemphasizing and exaggerating Ukraine's military advancements against Russia, and refusing to do an honest assessment on the human toll of this unjustifiable invasion. Okay? Ukraine has already gone through its Soviet-era provisions and its Soviet-era military equipment. They've completely burnt through it. Now they're just reliant on NATO equipment at this stage. But does Putin even want to negotiate? Yes, of course he does. Don't say Russia isn't negotiating. Of course, they were negotiating. They had a 15-point plan put together. I talked about it many times over. And then that negotiation fucking fell apart after Boris Johnson stepped foot inside of Ukrainian territory. Thank you, Bojo. A man that has absolutely, zero negative repercussions from extending this war. At the moment, the Ukraine isn't interested in negotiations. I don't believe that either. I think that no matter what happens, of course, Zelensky is interested in negotiations. The disorientation caused by Ukrainian war is producing strange bedfellows like Henry Kissinger and Noam Chomsky, who come from opposing ends of the political spectrum. Kissinger serving as Secretary of State under Republican presidents, and Chomsky, one of the leading left-wing intellectuals in the United States, and have frequently clashed. But when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, both recently advocated for Ukraine to consider settlement that could see it as dropping claim on some of the land to achieve a quicker peace deal. In short, the two stand for the same reasons, same version of pacifism. Perhaps the reason for why people are talking about that is because 14,000 people died in the lead up to the Russian invasion over the course of the many years of LPR and DPR, separatist movements fighting against the Ukrainian National Guard, and that this would avoid further conflict. But I don't know. Maybe that's the reason why at least Chomsky is interested in that, in a peace negotiation. But a moment of the brutal attempt to change our entire geopolitical situation. The true target of the war is the dismantlement of the European unity advocated not only by U.S. conservatives in Russia, but also by the European extreme right and left at this point. In France, Mélenchon meets Le Pen. Yeah, this is, Zizek is like doing, he just, ridiculous. I don't know what to say. He's doing like horseshoe political analysis. Wild. The craziest notion floating around these days is to counter the new polarity between U.S. and China, which stands to the excesses of Western liberalism and Oriental authoritarianism. Europe and Russia should rejoin forces and form a third Eurasian bloc based on the Christian legacy purified of its liberal excess. The very idea of a Eurasian third way is a form of today's fascism. post this real quick on my Instagram. Sorry. Why does he sound like an unhinged Twitter poster? Sad to see this Zizek take, and you introduced me to the left and reformed me for being a libertarian. Okay. So what will happen when voters in Europe and America, faced with the soaring energy costs and broader inflation driven by sanctions against Russia, might lose their appetite for a war that seems to have no end, with needs that are only expanding as both sides head for a protracted stalemate? The answer is clear. At that point, the European legacy will be lost, and Europe will be de facto divided between an American and Russian sphere of influence. I think he's grossly overemphasizing Russian sphere of influence. What Russian sphere of influence exists? Is it Mélenchon? Like Mélenchon is under the Russian sphere of influence? It's a ridiculous fucking take. Sorry, it's just fucking crazy. Like there's how? I just don't get it. Especially when, like, you know, if you're a leftist, you understand that there needs to be like some level of like underlying material need here. And Russia has no grip of control over Europe beyond energy, and that's a significant one. But like, yeah, maybe if you talk about Hungary, certainly, but like what sphere of influence exists when it comes to Russian affairs, Russian involvement in like fucking, you're saying Hungary and Serbia. Do you think Hungary and Serbia is impactful when you consider the rest of fucking Europe? Are you crazy? You sound like a Serbian pro-Russian politics will conquer the EU 100%. See, that's what I mean. Bro, you literally sound like a fucking unhinged Serb. You're Balkan posting when you say that. Okay? Like that's... How is energy not the material ground? Because the level of energy dependence that they have on Russia only goes so far. That energy dependence can create a peaceful negotiation process or a peaceful trade partnership with Russia. And the country that stands to gain the most from not letting that happen is America and the UK. It's just funny to be like, it is funny to be like, dude, yes, Serbs will overtake Europe, brother. Just you wait, you fucking mother bitch. Fuck you, bro. Anyway. What's absolutely unacceptable for a true leftist today is not only to support Russia, but also to make a more modest, neutral claim that the left is divided between pacifists and supporters of Ukraine, and that one should treat this division as a minor fact, which shouldn't affect the left's global struggle against global capitalism. When a country is occupied, it is the ruling class which is usually bribed to collaborate with the occupiers and maintain its privileged position, so that the struggle against its occupiers becomes a priority. The same can go for the struggle against racism. In a state of racial tension and exploitation, the only way to effectively struggle for the working class is to focus on fighting racism. This is why any appeal to the white working class, as in today's alt-right populism, betrays class struggle. Interesting. A lot of you anarchists are awfully quiet about this take here. Today, one cannot be a leftist if one does not unequivocally stand behind Ukraine. To be a leftist who shows understanding for Russia is like to be one of those leftists who, before Germany attacked the Soviet Union, took seriously German anti-imperialist rhetoric directed at the UK and advocated neutrality in the war of Germany against France and the UK. This is like every Reddit. It's basically like a summarization of like every Reddit argument. Like Slavoj Žižek was able to craft the most powerful Reddit post. The left will fail here. The game is over for it. But does this mean, like, there's no power? The left has no power, brother. What are we talking about? The left. You know what I mean? Like, what left? The left has no power and no say in what happens at all. Like, at all. So, an argument like this, usually done by, like, American liberals, an argument written like this by American liberals on, like, fucking, I don't know, The Atlantic or whatever, is basically to just signal to the rest of the fucking liberal media class that you're one of the good ones, okay? That's it. Like, there is... it's a silly thing to be like, the left has to be more united in its support for Ukraine. Like, what do you mean? Like, what if every single leftist came out and was like, dude, I fucking love Ukraine. I want to give Ukraine a nuke. Okay? I want to give Ukraine a nuke. Like, I want to give Ukraine 2 nukes, actually. I want to put boots on the ground. I want, you know, people to fight on the ground. Okay? If you said that, like, what difference would that make? Do you think Brandon listens to the left? Do you think that's how any kind of foreign policy is being crafted? That's it. Fuck it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I wish Ukraine had more nukes. I wish Ukraine never... I mean, I do unironically think that Ukraine should have never given up the nukes. But, yeah, we should just give Ukraine nukes. Let's do it. Okay, I said it. So what changed now? Like, does that mean Ukraine will get a nuke? Will they even join NATO? Will the NATO forces actually end up defending Ukraine? No, they won't. The left is powerless. They have no say in this process. All they can do is analyze the situation. Writing an article like this and being like, the left is so fucking divided on this issue and they should not be divided and they should advocate to give more guns to Ukraine is a silly one, especially considering that, like, pretty sure that Slavoj Žižek would agree with this. Like, there is no say, there's no power. The Ukraine is going to get as many guns as it's going to get, as much as America and specifically the UK see fit. Okay, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Just like at the top of the hour, you get a 60-second ad break. That is what I have seen fit for you. However, fear not, you can actually avoid said ads at the top of the hour when they come at the top of the hour every hour. How can you avoid those ads? Well, by subscribing, which you can do for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. Or you can get gifted a sub if you're lucky. But you should make your own luck if you're not by subscribing with a Twitch Prime, like I said, because it is free, ultimately. Here's the 1 minute ad break now. It's not a 1 out of 10. Fuck you guys. As many commentators noted, 2 things cannot but strike the eye in this rather obvious Freudian slip. Oh, in his speech in Dallas, he talks about the Bush speech, criticizing Russia's political system. The ex-president said, the result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. He quickly corrected himself, of Ukraine, then said Iraq anyway, to laughter from the crowd, and added 75, referring to his age. Many commentators noted 2 things cannot but strike in the eye of this rather obvious Freudian slip. The fact that the public received Bush's implicit confession as that the U.S. attack on Iraq, ordered by him, was a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion, with laughter, instead of treating it as an admission of a crime comparable to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, plus Bush's enigmatic continuation of his self-correction, Iraq anyway. What did he mean by it? That the difference between Ukraine and Iraq doesn't really matter? The final reference to his advanced age doesn't affect in any way this enigma. But it's dispelled the moment we take Bush's statement seriously and literally. Yes, with all the differences taken into account. Zelensky is not a dictator like Saddam. Bush did the same thing as Putin is now doing to Ukraine, so they should be judged by the same standard. On the day I'm writing this, we learned... Wait, what? Where is he going with this? So while... Bro, this is the same man that said we need to have a non-U.S. involved NATO in this article. What? This is a very weird article. I don't know why he wrote it like this. I mean, Like I do take Russia's threats and Russia's war crimes seriously, right? Like this is not something I take lightly. If you've been in here for long enough, you know this already, right? Like, as a matter of fact, people actually get very mad whenever this comparison is made because it offends American sensibilities. They're like, how dare you? You're utilizing this opportunity to shit on America when the main villain is Russia. Stop shifting the goal. Stop shifting our attention away from Russia to America. But it's like, no, I'm using that to help you come to terms with America's horrifying actions. Whereas it seems weird that people end up using Ukrainian blood to launder American war crimes, to whitewash American war crimes. It's kind of strange. So while putting Bush on a trial is no less illusionary than bringing Putin to the Hague Tribunal, the minimum to be done by those who oppose Russian invasion of Ukraine is to demand Assange's immediate release. Ukraine claims it's fighting for Europe, and Russia claims it's fighting for the rest of the world against the Western unipolar hegemony. Both claims should be rejected, and here the difference between right and left enters the stage. What? Bro, this is the weirdest conclusion for any article. What the fuck? So he's defending, obviously he's like criticizing, America. And did he write this entire article to like get liberals on board just so he could fucking defend Julian Assange? Is that why he wrote this article? Was this like a tactical, like, oh yeah, no, actually, like, I love Ukraine. We should give Ukraine more guns. Also, if you like to give Ukraine more guns, like I do, you should also advocate to free Julian Assange. Like, what the fuck is this article, bro? It just went into like a completely separate, weird fucking... What? It literally feels like he wrote this exclusively to make an argument about like how if you recognize Russian war crimes in Ukraine, you would never advocate to jail a person who, unearthed said war crimes. So free Julian Assange. He literally spewed Kremlin conspiracy of the sniper killings being an inside job when he used the hoax phone call as evidence. Yeah, the hoax phone call that the American State Department basically admitted. The hoax phone call that was covered by, or uncovered rather, by certainly, definitely Russian espionage was engaged there. But the hoax phone call that you're referencing between American diplomats that the American State Department basically admitted was real. Thank you. Yeah, I know. It's such bad Kremlin propaganda when I read articles written in the Christian Science Monitor, which seems like an unreputable, establishment paper, but it's not. It's actually very good. Interesting. Julian Assange should be in jail? Okay, bro. What is Ugopnik saying on this? I read the Zizek article. It's all over the place. He proposed the idea of somehow having a stronger NATO, which is not controlled by the U.S., whose imperialism he opposes. He says he's against fence-sitters on Ukraine while suggesting something which is virtually impossible. While relatively adequately criticizing those who call for all sides to just get along as a material impossibility, he proceeds to suggest an equally impossible idea. Yep, exactly. In the current historical context, NATO not being an extension of U.S. power. in effect, doing what he is doing, accusing others of doing. My boy's an incredible philosopher, but damn, he does suffer from the hot take syndrome, and it shows regularly in analysis of his current interstate affairs. No, I think he was just like trying to fucking launder a take about Julian Assange's emancipation in a Western media outlet, and recognizes that the only way that he could couch that is under like 11 paragraphs being like Ukraine needs to get more guns and the left sucks for not giving Ukraine more guns, as though like the left has any fucking say in the process. Real or you in denial? What do you mean? No, I mean I think his take is just everything we've heard before from liberals. It's surprising coming from Zizek. Yugopnik over Hassan. Well, Yugopnik and I agree on this. I mean, I already said exactly the same things that he said. The inherent contradictions within the main fucking point being, oh, like non-American NATO is like a larger impossibility than anything else, than the war coming to a peaceful conclusion out of nowhere. Anyway, let's talk about bipartisan.
The more pain and heartbreak you feel for those families.
Exactly.
Now to President Biden pushing for relief at the gas pump, calling for a federal gas.
What? They did an interview? You see this lady who lives 2 doors down from the school to plant a sack Arredondo? Love your streams.
2 doors down from Robb Elementary. I was there the day of the shooting. So thank you for changing exactly what I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, because you said we don't have the power to fire him. Let me give you a simple out. You can remove him because he's going to vacate his seat. So your agenda number 6 is a decision on whether or not to give him a leave of absence. Why the hell would you? Let him miss 3 meetings. He's my councilman. Let him miss 3. Don't waste any more time on him. I know you probably all have a relationship with him. I don't know him. He's my councilman. I'm sitting in a district right now that no councilman has come to my door to say, hey, how you doing? There's 22 lives that were lost. We all know why. The investigation's going to come in and tell us all why and what we can do better. What you can do right now is not give him, if he requested it, a leave of absence. Don't give him an out. We don't want him. We want him out. We wanted to do a recall petition, right? We had so much enthusiasm in it right away. 162 votes, we need 25%, right? But we can't because he hasn't been in his seat for 8 months. That's BS. So then we thought, how do we change the charter? Well, it's already been amended. We can't do it for another 2 years, but you can do something right now, tonight, and not table whether you're going to decide to give him that leave of absence. I implore you, do not give him that leave of absence.
I've heard you guys, and this bothers me a whole lot. I had an idea when I came in here. I was going to do a very short grant leave of absence so that we had to vote on it over and over and over, so you guys wouldn't see him. But I don't need to talk a whole lot more. I make a motion we do not grant the leave of absence for Councilman.
That's wild.
I did say.
So, another fucking insane part of this was apparently, and I don't know if this is debunked or not, but I read somewhere that there was the wife of one of the cops who called her cop husband saying she was bleeding and dying. Hold on. Yeah. Here it is.
Timelines and
Eva Morales' husband, a police officer, tried to save her after she was shot at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, according to the director of the State Department of Public Safety, Colonel Stephen McCraw. Shot. Called her husband and she said she was shot and she was dying. Her husband, a cop, wanted to go in with a gun to save her. However, Morales' husband, Ruben Ruiz, had his gun taken away and was detained and escorted off the scene after he received a call from his wife. We got an officer whose wife had called him and said she had been shot and she's dying, McCraw said in a video shared by PBS NewsHour. What happened to him...
I have authority by law. I can tell you that one of the biggest problems that